This happened a few years ago. At that time, I was living alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of my building. Overall, the apartment complex was quite nice, and I liked it a lot. However, I ended up living there for only a year until the end of my lease, when I moved elsewhere. This event happened near the end of my lease. It was nighttime, and I was home alone. My living room was at the back of the apartment, with the kitchen at the front. Since it was getting late, I planned to go to bed. It must have been around 11 p.m. I walked over to the living room window to close the curtains, as I did every night before sleeping. The window was actually a large sliding glass door that led to a small balcony. When I did this, I had a clear view of the parking lot where my car was parked. I noticed a person standing next to my car. This caught my attention, so I kept watching. It was a man, and he seemed to be messing with the car. I saw him try to open the door, but it was locked. Then I saw him looking through the windows and doing other suspicious things. I slid open the balcony door and stepped outside. I then shouted at him, telling him that it was my car. I expected him to run away, but instead, he just stared at me for a few moments. I yelled again, asking what he was doing. The man didn't answer, he just kept watching me. After a few seconds, he started walking away from the car toward my building. I saw him walk up to the main entrance and disappear from my view. Since the doors weren't in my line of sight, I couldn't tell if he had entered or not, but it seemed like he did. I found that strange. If someone was trying to break into a car, I wouldn't expect them to live there. I figured he was just passing by or something. I was relieved that he hadn't managed to get into my car, but I was suspicious about seeing him in the building. I didn't recognize the guy, but I also didn't know many people who lived there. I went back inside, closed the curtains, and started getting ready for bed. Probably about 2 minutes later, I heard trying to open my apartment door. I went to the living room and looked at the door. It was locked. After a few moments of silence, I peered through the peephole. I saw the same man who had been outside near my car. I didn't open the door, but I kept watching. He stood there for a short time and then knocked on the door. I didn't respond. After a few more seconds, he turned around and walked away. I had so many questions. Who was that guy? Why was he near my car? And why was he now at my door? After that, I only saw the man one more time. One afternoon, I arrived home from work, parked my car, and entered the building. As soon as I got into the elevator to go up, I saw the same man appear in the hallway and head toward the elevator. He was a little far away, but after he saw me, he started walking faster, almost running, trying to reach the elevator before the doors closed. But they shut before he could get in. As the door was closing, I had the impression that I saw something in his hands, something like a closed pocket knife or something similar. I quickly went up to my floor and entered my apartment without thinking twice. The man never came back to my door. I lived there for about 2 more months and never saw him again. I'm a very calm person, and sometimes I don't see the danger in certain situations, but I think that day I escaped death. This event happened in the summer of 2009. I had just gotten out of a marriage that I rushed into too quickly, and there I was, trying to find myself again. So I called 2 of my older brothers who live in New York and told them I was coming to visit. As expected, they were thrilled. I only needed to pay for the bus ticket, which was quite cheap. At the time, I had a good job, so I was able to buy it impulsively. Happily, I packed my suitcase, so full that I could barely close it, with all my favorite summer clothes, jewelry, makeup, and more. I arrived at the bus station, and everything was going smoothly. The lady at the service counter handed me my ticket, and I waited for the departure announcement. During the trip, we made a few stops until we reached the transfer station in Philadelphia, and that's when things got weird. Everyone who needed to switch buses got off, and a new group boarded. I saw many people with interesting appearances, but none stood out like him. There was a guy with long, scruffy brown hair, thick glasses, and a messy beard. He didn't smell bad or look homeless. On the contrary, he was well-dressed and wearing cologne. But there was something off about him, something that reminded me of a serial killer, a disturbed lumberjack. I always choose the window seat when I travel. It's just my thing. And of course, this strange guy sits right next to me. He starts talking. It was innocent enough at first. I'm not much of a talker by nature, so I just listened. He talked about his sister's wedding, saying he had just attended it in Philadelphia and was on his way to New York. I just nodded and smiled. Then he said, not just in a whisper, but the creepiest whisper I've ever heard in my life, "I'm going to kiss you now." Before I could react, he pressed his lips against mine, and his rough beard scraped my face. I screamed in horror and punched him with all the strength I had in my arm. He let out a loud yell and said that he loved me. I had never seen this man in my life. I quickly realized that he was mentally disturbed and got up, trying to climb over him to complain to the driver. That's when a young woman, sitting a few rows behind us, approached, apologizing profusely. She claimed he was her cousin and had a mental disability. She offered to switch seats with me, and I accepted immediately. The entire time, his laughter grew louder and more disturbing. That was the end of my interaction with them, or so I thought. At the next stop, I got off to buy some snacks. As I discreetly passed behind their seats, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. The two of them were kissing, whispering, and laughing. Were they really cousins, or was that just a lie? I felt relieved when I finally arrived in New York and saw my older brother waiting for me at the station. I ran into his arms, clearly shaken. He asked what was wrong, but I never told him exactly what had happened. Still, he and my sister tried to comfort me, but the fear of that moment still haunts me. Since that incident, I've continued to travel frequently, but just thinking about it gives me chills. The story I'm about to tell happened to me and my family 13 years ago, during the first months after my youngest sister was born. My older sister was in high school in the afternoon shift. I was in the 5th grade of elementary school, and my twin brothers were in the 7th grade. Since we had different school schedules, we took turns taking care of our little sister and our mother, who was still weak after childbirth. My father worked in construction, and due to the lack of jobs and low wages in our city and surrounding areas, he had to look for work in other states. When my mother got pregnant, this became even more urgent. At that time, he was working in Pernambuco, and due to financial reasons, he was only able to meet my sister when she was already 15 days old, during one of his surprise visits. These visits always filled us with excitement. That afternoon, my mother, for some strange reason, left the bedroom where she was sleeping with my sister and asked us to go up to the rooftop to check if my older sister was already on her way home. At that same moment, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. It was made of wood with a metal sheet and always scraped against the floor when moved. I thought my father had arrived. Excited, I ran to the entrance to see him first and help him with his things. My siblings and I always competed to do this. In the middle of the excitement, we forgot an important detail. My newborn sister was completely alone in the room. We only realized this mistake when it was already too late. On the way, I noticed a dark shadow in the backyard. Despite the dim lighting, it stood out in the darkness. An intense fear took over me, and without thinking twice, I ran back to the room, panicked. My mother also rushed inside, as if she knew something bad was happening. Everything happened so fast. I remember seeing a crouched silhouette at the foot of the bed where my sister was sleeping. The figure seemed to be staring at her intently. When we entered, it turned to face us. My mother screamed, rebuking whatever that thing was, as Christians usually do. In our home, we followed Christianity, but unlike other religions where baptism protects babies from evil, in ours, a person must be conscious and choose to be baptized. I heard my mother say that the entity had been cunning in luring us out of the room, but its plan had failed because the one who was with us was more powerful. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind swept through the room, and immediately, my mother and I ran outside. From the nearby plantations, we heard something moving through the corn stalks. When we looked closely, we saw a figure climbing a mango tree. It's hard to describe precisely. It looked human, but its shape twisted and transformed into something resembling a reptile the size of a small child as it climbed. When it reached the top, it remained still, watching us from between the branches. My brothers were coming down from the rooftop when everything happened. They said they heard a voice humming a song, which left them in a trance until my mother's screams snapped them out of it. That night, no one could sleep. On the house's roof, we heard footsteps and, from time to time, a sound that resembled a turkey, but with a much deeper tone. This kind of haunting wasn't the first or the last. On other occasions, when we went up to wait for my older sister, we saw a ball of fire appearing and disappearing among the trees near our house. Today, my sister is 13 years old and rebellious, like many girls her age. But something I must mention is that since she was little, she has been pursued by these beings. She has encountered a woman who appears in the house when she's alone, among other experiences that, if allowed, I will share another time. I hope this short story contributes to the channel, and I apologize if my writing isn't the best.